distress beacon pulsed like a dying heart, its signal faint but insistent, cutting through the static of the void. Captain Jessa Korr stared at the holodisplay aboard the Stellar Wraith, her crew's salvage ship, as the coordinates blinked in crimson. An uncharted exoplanet in the Ashen Meridian, a desolate stretch of space where stars burned cold and sensors often lied. The beacon's origin was no derelict freighter or lost probe. It was something older, alien, and buried in the ice of a world that didn't belong on any chart. Jessa's gut churned. She'd seen wrecks before, but this felt like a trap set by the cosmos itself. "Suit up," she told her crew, voice steady despite the prickle of dread. "We're going in." The Stellar Wraith descended through the planet's atmosphere, a howling maelstrom of gray sleet and jagged lightning. The exoplanet, designated XM47 by their nav system, was a frozen wasteland, its surface a jagged mosaic of black ice and ash-colored stone. The beacon's signal led them to a rift valley, where jagged spires loomed like the ribs of some colossal beast. At the valley's heart, half buried in frost, were the ruins' angular obsidian structures that seemed to shift in the corner of the eye, their edges defying geometry. Jessa's crew, 5 souls hardened by years of scavenging the galaxy's edges, felt the weight of the place before they even touched down. The airlock hissed open, and the cold bit like a living thing. Jessa led the way, her suit's thermal regulators humming against the sub-zero chill. Her second-in-command, Soren Quill, a wiry exobiologist with a knack for paranoia, scanned the ruins with a handheld spectrometer. "No organic signatures," he muttered, his breath fogging his visor. "But these structures are wrong. The angles don't add up." Beside him, Jace Merrow, the engineer, snorted. "Spooked by math now?" But his voice wavered, and his grip tightened on his plasma cutter. The other two, Lena and Kieran Vossler, siblings who handled comms and heavy gear, stayed silent, their eyes darting to the shadows pooling between the spires. The beacon's signal grew louder as they descended into the ruins, following a spiraling path carved into the ice. The walls were etched with glyphs that seemed to writhe under their headlamps, not carved but grown, like veins in stone. Jessa's headset crackled with static, and she swore she heard a whisper, not words, but a feeling, like despair given sound. "Anyone else getting that?" she asked. The crew shook their heads, but their faces said otherwise. The deeper they went, the heavier the air felt, as if the ruins were exhaling something ancient and hungry. They reached a central chamber, a vast dome of black stone that swallowed their light. At its center stood a monolith, a slab of obsidian taller than a man, its surface rippling like liquid under their beams. The beacon's signal was deafening now, a rhythmic pulse that matched the thud of Jessa's heart. Soren Quill's scanner fritzed, its screen flashing error codes. "This thing's alive," he whispered, stepping back. "Not biologically, but it's reacting to us." Jace Merrow laughed, a brittle sound. "It's a rock, Soren. Get a grip." But when he touched the monolith with his gloved hand, it hummed, a low vibration that shook the floor. The chamber shifted. Not an earthquake, but a deliberate motion, like the walls were breathing. The glyphs glowed faintly, casting a sickly green light that made the crew's shadows twist into impossible shapes. Lena Vossler's comms unit sparked, and she yelped, ripping off her headset. "It's in my head," she stammered. "It's saying we're not supposed to be here." Kieran grabbed her arm, his face pale. "She's right. I feel it too. Like something's watching." Jessa's training kicked in, her voice sharp. "Focus. We find the beacon source, tag it, and get out." No one panics, but panic was already creeping in. The chamber's walls began to close, not with a groan of stone, but with a smooth, organic slide, like flesh knitting together. The monolith pulsed faster, and Jessa saw it now faint cracks in its surface, leaking a viscous black fluid that pooled on the floor. Soren's scanner was dead, but he didn't need it to know they triggered something. "It's a mechanism," he said, voice shaking. "The whole ruin. It's waking up." Jace swung his plasma cutter at the monolith, but the beam skittered off, absorbed into its surface. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and something sweeter, like decay. They ran, retracing their steps, but the path had changed. The spiral corridor now branched into a labyrinth, its walls shifting to block their way. Jessa's HUD flickered, showing impossible readings, gravity spikes, temporal distortions. The whispers in her headset grew louder, a chorus of voices speaking no language she knew, but filling her with images of loss. Her childhood home burning, her crew's faces rotting, her own body unraveling into ash. She shook it off, shouting orders to keep the crew moving, but the ruins were alive now, reshaping themselves to trap them. Lena was the first to break. She stopped running, eyes wide, staring at a blank wall. "It's showing me," she whispered. "Me, but wrong." Before Kiran could pull her away, the wall pulsed, and a figure stepped out, a perfect replica of Lena. But its eyes were hollow, its skin too smooth, like polished bone. It reached for her, and when their hands touched, Lena screamed, her body collapsing into ash that scattered on the wind. Kiran lunged at the doppelganger, but it melted back into the wall, leaving only a smear of black fluid. The crew sprinted blindly now, the labyrinth tightening around them. Soren Quill's spectrometer was useless, but he kept muttering about energy signatures, about the ruins being a single organism. Jace's bravado was gone. He clutched his cutter like a lifeline, swearing under his breath. Jessa's mind raced. She'd seen traps before, but this was no machine. It was sentient, ancient, and it wanted them. The whispers grew into a roar, and she saw flashes of the other's fears. Soren's childhood terror of drowning, Jace's dread of being buried alive, Kieran's guilt over leaving Lena behind. They stumbled into another chamber, smaller, its walls lined with monoliths that pulsed in sync. At its center was a pit, and from it rose a shape, humanoid but wrong, its limbs too long, its face a featureless void. It didn't move, but seemed to pull the air toward it, draining the warmth from their suits. Kiran fired his rifle, the plasma bolts vanishing into the figure's form. "It's not real," he shouted, but his voice cracked. The figure tilted its head, and Kiran froze, his eyes glazing over. He turned to Jessa, his face blank, and said, "You brought us here." Then he stepped into the pit, and the darkness swallowed him. Jessa grabbed Soren and Jace, dragging them toward an exit that hadn't been there moments before. The walls were closing faster now, the glyphs burning brighter, the whispers a cacophony of despair. Jace tripped, and when he hit the ground, the floor rippled, tendrils of black fluid wrapping around his legs. He screamed, thrashing as the tendrils pulled him down, his body dissolving into the stone. "Run!" he gasped, his last word before he was gone. Jessa and Soren reached the surface, the stellar wraith a distant speck against the storm. The ruins shuddered, spires collapsing into the ice as if the planet itself was rejecting them. They sprinted, the ground cracking beneath their feet, the whispers now a scream that threatened to split Jessa's skull. Soren stumbled, and she hauled him up, her suit's alarms blaring as the cold seeped through. The ship's ramp was in sight when Soren stopped, his face slack. "It's in me," he whispered, and before Jessa could react, he turned and ran back toward the ruins, vanishing into the storm. Jessa boarded the stellar wraith alone, her hands shaking as she punched the launch sequence. The ship roared into the sky, the ruins collapsing into a vortex of ash and ice below. The whispers faded, but the weight of them lingered, a seed of despair planted in her mind. She set a course for the nearest outpost, knowing she'd never outrun what she'd seen. The holodisplay flickered, and for a moment, she swore she saw her own face staring back, eyes hollow, skin too smooth. As the ship slipped into the void, the distress beacon signal flared one last time, then went silent. But Jessa knew it wasn't gone. The Ashen Meridian was awake, and it would call again. The ruins didn't stay buried. Months later, Jessa sat in a dimly lit bar on a fringe colony, nursing a drink she couldn't taste. The newsfeed on the wall blared about a new expedition to XM-47, funded by some megacorp chasing alien tech. She wanted to warn them, to scream that the ruins weren't just ruins, that they were alive and hungry. But her voice caught in her throat, drowned by the whispers that still echoed in her dreams. She'd seen the monoliths in her sleep, their surfaces rippling with her crew's faces, their voices begging her to return. She paid her tab and left, her ship waiting in the docks. The galaxy was vast, but nowhere felt safe anymore. Every shadow held the shape of the ruins. Every silence carried their song. Jessa knew she'd go back one day, not because she wanted to, but because the Ashen Meridian wasn't done with her. It had tasted her fear, her loss, and it would call her home.